The trucks didn't slow down gently. They stopped all at once. The sudden jolt threw several prisoners forward, chains clinking softly in the silence that followed. No engine noise, no shouting, just the wind moving through the trees and the distant sound of boots on dirt. That was when fear truly set in. This wasn't a camp. There were no fences, no barracks, no signs, only an empty stretch of road, bordered by trees and open land, exactly the kind of place where no one would ever know what happened. The Americans gave the order to get down. Their voices were calm, almost casual. That calm was terrifying. The prisoners stepped off the trucks one by one. Some stumbled from exhaustion. Others moved stiffly, as if their bodies already knew what was coming and were trying to delay it. They were lined up loosely, not even in a proper formation. That made it worse. No rules meant no expectations. A few prisoners whispered prayers under their breath. One man clenched his jaw so hard it hurt, determined not to beg. Another stared at the ground, unable to look at the soldiers' faces. They waited for commands. None came. Seconds stretched into minutes. Every rifle remained lowered, but every prisoner knew how quickly that could change. They had heard the stories during the march, about unexpected stops, about quiet places, about how the Americans didn't waste time or words. One prisoner finally lifted his head and glanced sideways. The Americans weren't angry. They weren't smiling either. They just waited. Then one of the soldiers turned and climbed into the back of the truck. That single movement made several prisoners flinch. This was it. Whatever he was reaching for would decide everything. The air felt heavy. Breathing became difficult. Hearts pounded so loudly it seemed impossible the soldiers couldn't hear them. No one spoke. No one moved. And then, something completely unexpected happened. The soldiers stayed inside the truck longer than expected. Every second felt stretched thin. The prisoners stood motionless, afraid that even breathing too loudly might change what was coming next. No one spoke. No one dared to look away. Their eyes followed the Americans' boots as they shifted inside the truck bed. Then something strange happened. A smell drifted through the air. At first it made no sense. It wasn't fuel, it wasn't smoke, it wasn't damp earth, it was warm, rich, almost comforting. Food. One of the prisoners frowned, confused, his fear briefly interrupted by disbelief. Another lifted his head slightly, nostrils flaring as if his body reacted before his mind could stop it. The soldier climbed down. In his hands was a large metal tray. Golden brown pieces filled it. Irregular shapes, still steaming. The smell grew stronger, unmistakable now. Fried chicken. The line of prisoners froze, unsure how to react. This had to be some kind of mistake, or a test, or something crueler than bullets. The American set the tray down carefully on the ground. Then he went back to the truck, and came back with another, and another. No shouting, no orders barked, just quiet movement and metal trays placed gently in front of people who were certain they were about to die moments earlier. One prisoner whispered, barely audible, "This can't be real." The Americans finally spoke, not loudly, not harshly. "Eat." The word landed heavier than any threat ever could. For a long moment, no one moved. The food sat there, untouched, steaming gently in the cool air. The smell was almost painful now because it reminded them of something most had tried to forget. Normal life. One prisoner stared at the tray as if it might disappear the moment he blinked. Another swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. Hunger clawed at them, but fear held them frozen in place. They had survived too long to trust something this strange. An American soldier stepped forward slowly, careful not to startle anyone. He tore a piece of chicken in half and took a bite himself. No rush, no show, just a simple action. Then he held the rest out. The first prisoner reached forward. His hands shook violently. He expected to be stopped, to be shouted at, to be punished for moving without permission. Nothing happened. He took the food. The moment it touched his fingers, something broke inside him. His shoulders slumped. He looked down, staring at the piece of chicken as if it were unreal. He took a bite, his eyes closed. Around him, others followed, hesitant at first, then faster. Some ate carefully, savoring every second. Others devoured the food like they feared it might be taken away. No one spoke. There were quiet sounds instead: breathing, chewing, a muffled sob someone tried and failed to hide. One young prisoner wiped his face angrily, embarrassed by the tears, but the American nearest to him looked away, pretending not to notice. Another prisoner stopped mid-bite and whispered, "Why? Why are you doing this?" The soldier shrugged, "Because you're hungry." No speeches, no lectures, no judgment. Just food passed from hand to hand. For the first time in months, maybe years, the prisoners weren't being measured by uniforms or sides. They were simply being fed. And in that moment, they understood something that no order or threat could have taught them. This was not a trick. When the last pieces of food were gone, no one spoke. The trays lay empty on the ground, scraped clean without a single crumb wasted. Some prisoners still held their hands close to their chests, as if afraid the warmth would vanish if they let go. The Americans didn't rush them. That alone felt unreal. One soldier moved along the line, collecting the trays slowly, nodding once to each prisoner as he passed. Not checking, not counting, just acknowledging. Another soldier poured water into paper cups and handed them out one by one. He waited until each cup was taken before moving on. The prisoners drank carefully, respectfully, as if this moment required silence. Something had shifted. The fear that had locked their shoulders tight when they first stepped off the trucks had loosened. Not disappeared, but softened. Backs straightened. Eyes lifted. One prisoner finally dared to look directly at an American soldier. The soldier met his gaze and didn't look away. That simple exchange did more than the food ever could. Soon, quiet words began to pass between the prisoners. Not rumors, not panic, just disbelief. They fed us. They waited. They didn't rush us. An older prisoner cleared his throat and spoke aloud, his voice unsteady. "Thank you." The nearest soldier paused. He seemed surprised, almost uncomfortable. Then he answered quietly, "War's hard enough." No cheering, no speeches, no dramatic moment. Just a sentence that stayed with them. When the order finally came to move, it wasn't shouted. The prisoners were guided back toward the trucks, not pushed, not hurried. As they climbed aboard, something felt different. They no longer felt like cargo. As the engine started, one prisoner looked back at the field. The empty trays, the calm soldiers, the place where he had been certain he would die. Instead, he was leaving full and alive. The trucks rolled forward slowly. No one spoke as the road stretched out ahead of them. The prisoners sat quietly, the sound of the engine mixing with their own thoughts. Some stared at their hands, still half expecting the warmth to fade, as if the meal had only been imagined. Others leaned back against the wooden sides of the truck, exhausted in a way that went deeper than hunger. What had happened didn't fit into anything they understood about war. They had prepared themselves for cruelty. They had prepared themselves for punishment. They had prepared themselves for the worst. What they had not prepared for was mercy. One prisoner broke the silence at last, speaking softly, almost to himself. "I was sure we wouldn't leave that field." No one argued. Another nodded. "So was I." The road passed through small villages and open countryside. Life went on around them, unchanged, unaware of the moment that had just altered everything for those riding in the back of the truck. Years later, when the war was over, many of them would be asked what captivity was like. They would struggle to answer. Some memories were too heavy, some too complicated, some too painful. But there was one moment they always shared. The stop, the silence, the fear, and then the food. Not because it was fried chicken, not because it was American, but because of what it meant. It meant they were still seen, still human, still worth feeding. One former prisoner would later say, "They could have done anything to us that day. Instead, they chose not to." That choice stayed with them longer than fear ever could. In a war remembered for destruction, this was the moment they carried forward. Not the threat of death, but the unexpected kindness that proved it didn't have to end that way.